Meeting people on Camino. If you're planning your first Camino, you could be in one of two frames of mind. One, how will I meet people? Or how will I avoid people? That's what we're going to be talking about this week, coming right up. So one of the things that a lot of people think about, ask questions about, particularly when they're planning their first Camino, is what about other people that I'm going to meet? And typically there are two kind of camps here. There are people who like to be a bit social, and they're wondering how they go about meeting other people on the Camino. And there are going to be those who kind of want to be on their own and don't want to meet other people. So what I'm going to do is to share some tips for both groups. And then particularly if you've never walked a Camino, I'll explain just how some of these meetings take place and grow and how people bond, and it's a fascinating part of the Camino, just how you meet people and the range of people that you meet. It's one of the most appealing aspects, I think, of walking a Camino. So, as always, let me just put some context around this. So, I have only walked 3 Caminos, and that has been the Camino Francis every time, twice from Saint-Jean all the way to Santiago, and once with my wife Pat for about the last 200 Ks. So, my comments are based on walking what is the most popular Camino route, whatever part of the world you're in. And during a fairly busy period. So I tended to walk the Camino Francis late April, May, and that pre-COVID was actually one of the busiest periods. People tend not to walk too much in the middle of summer. Some people walk in winter, not a lot. But there's kind of 2 peak periods generally for the Francis, and it's May and I think it's September. Excuse me, I'm going to be scratching my nose a little bit. I'm still trying to get over this flu or whatever it is I've got. So I've got a hot drink going here. Okay, so it's based on the Camino Francis. So bear in mind, particularly if it's your first Camino, how well sort of populated with pilgrims the routes are going to be. The Camino Portuguese, obviously coming up through Portugal, is fairly popular. You're going to see lots of people on that one. The Norte, I think, is probably the third most popular. The Via de la Plata coming up from the south is not a lot of people on that because it's quite a long and remote one. And then you've got the Lana, and let's not go into them all, but there are many, many different routes. The Camino Francis is the most popular one, and it tends to be the one, either that or the Portuguese, it tends to be the one that people try first. Yes, try first. Note the way I say that, because many, many people get addicted and they'll be back again trying the same ones or different ones. So regardless, let me kind of give you a few tips, I guess, on other people that you're going to come across on the Camino, whether you want to meet them or not. Okay, and this is based on the Camino Francis. So my first Camino Francis, I walked on my own in 2015. And I would say, if you've watched any of the other videos on the channel, I prefer walking on my own, but I get lonely. So I'll kind of explain that as we go through. Why do I want to be on my own? Because I find it's a richer experience walking on my own, and actually walking on my own, I meet more people because, if you're feeling a little bit lonely, you kind of want to reach out to people. So it encourages me to meet other people. If I'm walking with Pat, we kind of stay to ourselves a bit and we don't meet as many people. So I like to set out on my own, and I like to walk quite a bit on my own, but I really enjoy the interaction with other pilgrims too. So let me give you a few little tips, and then I'll talk about people that I've met. If I've met you on Camino, yeah, don't panic, don't worry. I'll change the names to protect the innocent. But how do you sort of come about meeting people? So you're going to meet people in your accommodation. So if you're staying in our Berghaus, the sort of communal hostels, you're going to be thrown amongst a whole bunch of people, so it's hard not to meet people. If you're very much of an introvert, you might find that a little bit confronting. So I'm sure you have coping mechanisms for all of that. Albergues do have private rooms, some of them. I tend to use private rooms. I just like a bit of privacy. It's not that I'm sort of antisocial. And then, you've got all the other accommodation options, and you'll find videos on the channel about that. But whatever type of accommodation you're using will dictate to a little bit, the opportunity for meeting people. You're going to have more opportunity to meet people in albergues, although I kind of had the opposite. I'll come to that. And then obviously if you're, setting out or with people and so on, depending on the time of year that you're walking, you're going to bump into lots more people. So let's work on the premise that you are walking on your own and you would actually quite like to meet other people. Maybe, you're a little bit shy, but you don't want to be kind of too lonely. How do you actually go about it? Well, if you think about it, and walking from Saint-Jean during a fairly busy period, you're going to start out with a block of pilgrims almost, and I'm sure this is the same on most other Camino routes. The Camino Francis particularly though, because there's a lot more people. And at the times that I've set out from Saint-Jean, I kind of roughly worked out there was probably 300 people a day starting out. So, you ain't lonely. Sometimes it's hard to find a bit of space to, get some privacy when you're walking. So you're starting out with this block of other pilgrims, and that block of pilgrims is moving along the Camino. So it's almost like this sort of mobile community, which is quite magical in a way, because you'll meet people on your first day, and you're going to keep seeing those people potentially for weeks, obviously depending on how long you're walking. And I found on my first Camino, I eventually got to know about 50 people by name, and I would easily recognize at least 100, very often by what they're wearing, because we're all wearing the same things virtually every day. And so the opportunity to meet with people, interact with people, is really quite interesting, because you're in this moving community, and you'll meet people one day and then not see them for 3 weeks, and then suddenly you'll meet them again. It can be like meeting long lost friends. So that's one element to think about. You're not constantly amongst strangers necessarily. You're literally walking along the same path as a whole bunch of other people, depending on the route that you're walking and how popular it is. So if you're a little bit of an introvert and you kind of want to, prompt conversations and things like that, it's a little bit like dating, I think, if I can remember back that far. But, a glance, a smile, the body language, you kind of know whether someone's open to having a chat or, saying hello, and, if they're casting their eyes down or looking away, we all understand body language. We kind of know whether someone's, inviting conversation or open to conversation. So that sort of body language bit, a smile goes a huge way. I walk on my own mostly, and I might be sitting at a cafe, and please don't think I stalk people, but this is kind of how people interact on the Camino. You'll be having your coffee, and literally, if you haven't walked on a Camino before, you'll be sitting outside having a coffee, and there could be 20 other pilgrims there. How do you know they're pilgrims? Because they're all wearing walking clothes, and they're all, you probably recognize half of them. So you're sort of glancing around and, nodding and smiling, and it's very easy just to say, hi. And the typical ways that people kind of open a communication are, and remember, you've got people from all different nationalities. So the traditional greeting, buen camino, which means literally in Spanish, good way, or have a good Camino. So you're going to hear that thousands of times. It's the pilgrim greeting. You'll hear local people giving you that sort of blessing as well, buen camino, as you're walking through. But pilgrims generally, on first meeting or when you're passing them on the path, they'll say buen camino to each other. And it's just the traditional greeting along the way. Excuse me. So that in itself almost, opens up an opportunity to talk. The other thing that I'll often do is just sort of say hi to people, and it's funny, how I've never walked one of the long trails in America, but they have these trail names, apparently, as sort of nicknames that hikers give to other hikers. It's almost a bit like that on the Camino, because it's generally all, first names, very informal, and we're always curious about where people come from. And so, you know, I met Bob from Melbourne. No, sorry, I met Bob from LA. You know, Rob from Melbourne, might be Mary from Arizona, and everybody knows them as that. You know, has anyone seen Gert from Germany today? You know, because that sort of curious element, everybody wants to know where you're from. So, you know, I'm Rob from Sydney when I'm walking. You know, hi, what's your name? Where are you from? And you become, you know, Jane from France or whatever. And so you find that people will be very open to communication generally because, you know, you're all on this same journey, you've all got the same purpose, and, you know, starting up conversations is easier probably on Camino than anywhere else in the world. People often say it's a bit like speed dating. If you can imagine, you know, you're setting out with this block of pilgrims and you're generally seeing the same faces day in, day out, and you're all heading the same way to the same place for a very similar purpose. You know, immediately you've got so much in common. And what tends to happen is you kind of almost get this speed dating on steroids. You know, you'll meet a new face, and like within 2 minutes, you're sharing each other's life stories. It's just the way it happens. You know, it's a lovely part of the Camino. People just open up, and it's never about, you know, material things or jobs or whatever. You know, it's kind of where you're from and, you know, why you're here, and what, you know, and you hear people's, you know, stories about why they're walking the Camino and stuff, and it's absolutely fascinating. You know, when I say it's never about kind of who you are and what you do, it's never about that sort of materialistic stuff. I'm just thinking of hundreds of people that I've met walking on the Camino. Do I know what any of them did for a job? One, I think. Yep. And you're from Sydney and you run a baking company, you know, if you're watching this. I don't think I knew what jobs anyone did because it's not really of interest. You know, that's not why we're there, and I think that's what makes it this wonderful sort of mobile community as well. That people are just interested in you know, who you are, not what you do or where you come from. So that's really sort of interesting that people will, you know, open up conversations very, very quickly and quite deeply. It's amazing, some of the conversations. It's like, but it seems so natural, you know. It's like sometimes you kind of pinch yourself and say, I met this person 5 minutes ago, and yet, you know, I know everything about them now and what, you know, about their crazy relative or whatever it might be. And I do the same. If you want to encourage conversation and, you know, maybe you're a bit shy, a bit introverted, there's a few little ways you can do that. So, you know, smiling at people kind of makes it clear that you're maybe open to a conversation. I have badges on the back of my pack. Have I got my pack here? No, it's in the other room. So I have a couple of flags. I've got an Australian flag and a Thai flag. And, you know, people will very often say, what's that other flag? I recognise the Australian one, or they might think it's New Zealand. So again, you know, people might be walking up behind me and quite often I go, oh, another Aussie, because they've seen the flag, you know, and a conversation starts. Or, you know, equally it might be, what's that stripy flag? And I go, oh, that's Thailand. Oh, why have you got a Thailand flag? Well, my wife's from Thailand, you know, and you're off, you've got a conversation. I met a guy from LA who's actually on Ivar's forum, and I carry a teddy bear when I'm walking. There's Mr. Bean, my teddy bear. And he kind of went, love your teddy bear. You know, my wife collects teddy bears, and we're having a chat about teddy bears. So it can be anything like that, you know. So if you want to encourage people to talk to you because maybe you're a little bit shy but you want to interact, you know, put stuff on your pack, put stuff on your hat. I can remember, it's amazing how you remember names. Rebecca from Denmark. Hey, Rebecca, if you're watching. She had a what do you call them in America? A ball cap with a yellow Camino arrow on it. And I can remember Rebecca walked past me and I said, oh, make sure you're going the right way. And she said, oh, why? I said, because you've got the arrow on your hat. I don't want to get lost. You know, and we had a chat, and I think we met a couple of days later as well. So, you know, what you're wearing, your badges and things like that can all encourage conversation. What if you don't want to engage in conversation? What if, you're just really shy and you want to just walk and not engage with other people? People will leave you alone, don't worry. And again, it comes down to body language a bit. Just don't make eye contact. I've mentioned to a couple of people who are worried about this, look busy. Where's my phone? It's under here somewhere. Imagine that's my phone, if some people coming along, maybe you don't really want to interact with them, just step to the side of the path and maybe make out you're taking photos. Or other people have said, carry a rosary, something like that. They'll kind of leave you alone because they'll think you're praying the rosary. People are not going to intrude. They're only going to interact with you if you appear to be open to interaction. If it's very obvious that you really don't want to talk to other people, then people will generally leave you alone. So don't feel that just because you're in this moving community that it's going to be, difficult for you if you're very introverted. I'm kind of in the middle, a bit weird really. I love periods of walking on my own and reflection and so on. I get lonely in the evenings, and because I very often stay in private accommodation, and it might be a little casa rural in the country, and I can be the only person staying there, and I find sort of dinner on my own sometimes can be a bit lonely. So I generally sort of seek out company for dinners if I can. But it's quite funny. I think of myself as a bit of an introvert, extrovert. My wife, Pat, is very introverted. So when we're walking together, we don't interact with a lot of people at all because Pat just wants us to sort of stay together and do our thing. I like the interaction with other people. And my wife calls me Norma when we're on Camino, because my dearly departed mother, her name was Norma, and she would strike up conversations at the bus stop. And I'm a bit like that because I'm interested in people, and I like to chat to people. And constantly she'd be saying, "Come on, Norma, come on, stop chatting, we've got to get on." Because I met someone at the side of the trail or something and, started up a conversation. So whichever way you fall, if you want to have company and conversations, or if you don't, it's very easy on Camino to kind of to do that, and people will respect it. Let me just look at my notes here. So other ways to sort of meet people. What you'll find is particularly on the busier Caminos, if you're sort of parked at the side of the trail, sitting, and maybe you got your boots off doing something, quite often people will pause as they're going along. "Are you okay? Need help with anything?" It's a very friendly, supportive environment. I tend to do that, because, I carry a bit of first aid stuff, and I've lent people all sorts of things. So if they need something, I can help them out. So there's that sort of way as well of interacting. Let's move on a little bit, and I'll talk about some of the interactions that I've had on Camino, and I'll try to remember to change names to protect the innocent. So let me share some sort of real life cases, if you like, of how people meet. Now, if you've walked a Camino, you're going to think, "Rob, this is ridiculous. You just walk and you meet people." But people who haven't walked a Camino before will be wondering, well, how does this work? How do you meet people? So let me share. So on my very first Camino, I was staying in this little hotel in Saint-Jean, and it would have been having breakfast, I think. And there was a couple on the next table, and it was very obvious they were from Australia as well. And I think, "Oh, hi, from Australia? What part?" And conversation starts. They were staying in Saint-Jean that day, and I was walking up to Horizon. And then I used the express Buricot service. So I got picked up at Horizon, brought back down to the same hotel at Saint-Jean, and then taken back up to start off again the next day. That's another option if you want to break up that first day out of Saint-Jean. And so I saw them that evening, actually, for dinner, I think. And they were going, "Oh, how was the first day?" So we're having a little bit of a chat. Lovely couple from Queensland. I met them on and off for probably a month. And, that just started, I guess, that conversation by hearing the accent, "Oh, where are you from?" That first evening in Saint-Jean, I met a couple of lovely ladies from South Australia. Again, it was probably the accent, what part of Australia are you from? We ended up having dinner together. And I saw them off and on for probably 3 or 4 weeks. So, immediately on day one, wherever you're starting from, I was starting in Saint-Jean, it's like Pilgrim Central, there's all these people walking around, where if you stop for a coffee or a meal or something, you're going to be sitting next to other pilgrims, and you're going to see them on the trail. So it's very easy to open conversations. On a later Camino, in 2018, when I was walking with Pat, this was her first time walking all the way from Saint-Jean. And that was interesting because we walked out of Saint-Jean and the hill sort of climbs a bit and she was going, oh no, is it like this all the way? And we were probably 500 meters out of Saint-Jean. And we both noticed there was a road off down to the left, and we both noticed a figure walking up the road really quickly wearing this yellow jacket. We sort of didn't think anything of it. And then we were probably a few hundred meters, further up, going up the hill towards Horizon. And we looked around and this figure coming up behind us wearing this yellow jacket. And I think this lady is on the Camino forum. And this lady very quickly caught up with us, and I'll sort of change some names, but it was something like, "Oh, hi, my name's Jane. I'm from America. I'm actually mostly blind. I can't really see the signs. Can I walk with you guys?" And I went, "Oh, sure." And so we walked with Jane up towards Horizon. It was quite amusing because her sight was good enough that she could see the trail, but not the arrows and things like that. And we got to Junto, which is like a little accommodation building partway up, where you go up the steep bit, up a rough track. And Jane sort of said, "Oh, is there another way? Can I continue on the road?" And I said, "Oh yeah, look, the road just kind of loops around a bit. It'll be a bit longer. That's all right." So she said, "Oh, I'll take that route." And she walked a lot quicker than us. And the next time we saw Jane was actually at Horizon in the albergue there, and where we'd stopped for lunch, and she was there with her husband. And her husband was totally blind. And they were walking the Camino together. Absolutely lovely couple. And we saw them, probably almost on a daily basis until beyond Pamplona. Really lovely people. And, just such a random meeting. Who else have I met? There was a young couple from the UK who, on my very first Camino, I briefly met them at Auberge Horizon on day one, where we were having lunch. And then I don't think I really saw them again until Castro Jerez, so that would have been like 2 weeks later. But I'd maybe seen them off and on, I hadn't really spoken to them. And we were walking up the hill after Castro Jerez, and then finally, got to have a chat. And, we saw you on day one. And, had a great chat. I mentioned the guy who sort of saw the teddy bear. The lovely Australian couple that I met on day one, funnily enough, I met again on, it would have been day 3, at a cafe where I'd stopped for lunch. And so, I knew them. So it was like, "Hi, Dave, how you going?" And they were sitting with a group of about 10 other Australians. They'd kind of all gathered together. It was like Team Oz. And so because I knew a couple of people in the group, I took my coffee over and said hi, and then got to meet the other people. And, then I kind of met 10 more people who I saw off and on all the way down the trail. So, it's all these sort of chance encounters. Obviously, on a more remote Camino, you're not going to see as many pilgrims. So, I'm doing a more remote one next time on the Via de la Plata. And from what I've researched, I might see 5 or 6 other pilgrims each day, but I imagine I'll kind of get to know them reasonably well because it's going to be the same 5 or 6 pilgrims, staying in similar places every day. Whereas on the Camino Francis, it was much bigger groups. Who else did I bump into? To protect the innocent, I'll give you the name Susan, but you'll know who you are if you're watching this. So I was walking up beyond Pamplona up to Alto del Perdón, which, if you've seen that movie, it's where they've got the steel sculptures of the pilgrims and the big windmills. And I was walking up there sort of fairly slowly because I had damaged legs. And I met Susan standing by the side of the path. And actually, if you're watching this, you remember I first saw you walking out of Roncesvalles. In fact, I'd seen you twice before. We'd said hello as we set out from Roncesvalles, and saw you again in Biscarreta, and we said hello there. And so because I recognised the face, and Susan was sort of standing by the side of the trail, I just stopped and said, oh, hi, I haven't seen you for a couple of days. And it turned out she was suffering really bad blisters. And so, we talked about blisters for a bit, and I said, oh, look, I'm walking slow, or do you mind if I walk with you? And we'll walk up over the hill together. We got on famously, great chat. And, this is what happens on Camino. You just kind of click with people. And it generally happens if people are walking at your pace, and you have similar interests or something like that. I ended up walking with Susan on and off for about a week. We stayed at different places in actual different towns that night. I said, maybe see you on the trail tomorrow. And we did, because we're all walking along the same trail. I said, I'm starting out about 9, maybe see you there. So we ended up sort of staying in different places all the time, but inevitably sort of met up on the trail and continued the conversations. Not always walking together, sometimes walking together, maybe having lunch together. It was really nice. And then gradually what happens is sometimes you'll drift apart because her feet was really getting bad and she was having to take time off, and I needed to press on. So that's typically what happens. So you'll hear the term particularly related to the more busy Caminos, in that you'll very often sort of tie up with what they call a Camino family. I've kind of done that a little bit, with the Aussies on the first Camino, and then another group, because I walked very slowly. That group had gone ahead of me, and then I kind of teamed up with another group. These are really just loose groups of people that come together. Very often it's because they're staying in the same accommodation. Excuse me, apologies, trying to get over this cold. Very often it's because they're staying in the same accommodation. And they're not going to walk together in a big group, but they might say, oh, where are you going to be tonight? Oh, Ponferrada, where are you planning to stay? Oh, we'll come and see you there. And, you get these sort of Camino families or groups of friendships building up, and that they'll kind of walk together. That particular group, I think about 8 or 9 of them walked together all the way to Santiago. I don't mind that, but I prefer to kind of do my own thing. So if you want to be in a group, you can to a degree, but you can always drop out, go faster, go slower. That group went on. They sort of left me behind, I think, from about Pamplona, because I was walking quite slow. And then I kind of met up with another group. And there was some Aussies and people from the UK, some lovely Americans. Where were you from? Yeah, in a restaurant. Just got married after the Camino, I seem to remember. Philip and Mary. Lovely people. That was an interesting group. There was Americans, Brits, Aussies, all sorts of people. And we would keep in touch on WhatsApp. And not that you're sort of trying to live in each other's pockets, but you kind of look out for each other as well. And that's a nice part of the Camino. So, I might get a message on WhatsApp, have you seen Fred today? I haven't seen him for a few days. Oh yeah, I saw him in Othabero, he was going good. Oh, that's fine, And then, somebody else would send you a message, we're in Leon tonight. Where are you? Oh, I'm in Leon. Oh, you want to have dinner together? Things like that. Which is quite nice. Yeah, you can kind of opt in or out of that kind of stuff. You don't have to meet with other people, but it's nice if you want to.